Routine can be a really important part of healing with mental illness. For many, routines can really come as a comfort. However, there comes a point when some of us are so wrapped up in our routines and rigid standards that routine actually becomes more harmful than helpful. So in this video, we're going to be talking about finding the right balance between routine and flexibility. So if we have a scale, routine will be on one side, high routine, and high flexibility will be on the other side. In the middle is a collab that is routine v flexibility. I would argue that leaning too close to either side of the scale can be harmful if that is your baseline. So let's talk about the scale. So over on the highly routine side, routine is very ritualized, routinized, if you will. You might have little ability to manage change or have a real avoidance of change. Now, on the other hand, flexibility. For someone who values flexibility and might be over on the high flexibility side, routine or repetition or the same thing in that way over and over again can feel really confining and really limiting. It might also be hard to form new habits though when you are way more on the flexible side than on the routine side. There might be other effects as well, like having weird sleeping hours, for example. Now, when routines and flexibility meet somewhere in the middle, wherever that might be for you, this is really where a person has like somewhat consistent enough routines that when and if tweaks and changes need to be made, they can make them without feeling so averse to doing so, and or can put a few more practices in place to form some new habits. So that's kind of the middle ground. Admittedly, I am more over on the routine side. I think that makes a lot of sense for me. I have troubles when I learn that my routine is going to be interrupted on a given day or a given week. I think this makes sense. I think it's reflected in my diagnosis of obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So let's talk about routine first. When is it helpful and when is it harmful? Routine can be really helpful in establishing a rhythm or a cadence for a certain season. It gives you more certainty over how things will go or you plan them to go, and it takes out the decision piece of what am I doing next? What am I doing next? It's routine. You've thought about it already and then it's become this solidified cadence. Routine is helpful when you can use it as a tool and you understand that it's going to change over time as life circumstances change or as you have new goals, things like that. Routine isn't helpful when we like to go spiraling or get into negative patterns of thinking. Also, when behaviors that are integrated in your routine are behaviors you want to get rid of, it makes it harder to do so. I also think routine isn't helpful in the way that someone might say, that's just the way we do it around here. That's just the way I do it around here. When that might not actually be like the quote unquote best way or most joyful way or most authentic way for you. And also it can be really harmful when you cling to routine so much that you get mad at life when something gets in the way of that routine. So let's do the same thing with flexibility. How is flexibility helpful and how can it be not as helpful? Just like routine, flexibility is helpful in so many ways. I personally am trying to be way more flexible so that I can better cope with changes as they come up. Someone who's very flexible can pivot really well, think fast, ride the waves as things come up. They're perhaps less averse to change because they're flexible. Flexibility really comes in handy really anytime you're dealing with people and you probably have a much lower blood pressure, maybe. Flexibility might not be as helpful, or I should say high flexibility might not be quite as helpful when you're trying to form new habits or reach certain goals. So if you think of like writing or going to the gym and building habits, if you don't have an established routine, at least for me, those things are way less likely to get done and actually become a routine. Plus, if I don't know when I'm doing it in the week or in the day, I'll spend my time in the day or the week thinking about when I'll do it, and eventually that day or week will be over. Also, it can be hard when we're too flexible and maybe we aren't giving ourselves enough parameters when it comes to things like basic self-care needs, like putting off going to the grocery store, letting yourself off the hook for being in bed multiple days for a long time when you know that's going to lead you into a downward spiral, not keeping up with hygiene, things like that. So I have 5 tools to talk about today to find kind of this balance between routine and flexibility and have us land somewhere in the middle rather than in either extreme. The first thing is it's not an either or, it's a yes and. This is just realizing that both in general are necessary, I think. You just have to find where on the scale that it makes sense for you to be and where you want to be on the scale. And you can find ways to move across it as well. Also, in different times or different like domains of your life, for example, personal, creative, like going to work, friends, like maybe you're over here or maybe you're over here for different times and it varies across those domains. That's also great. The next two are very similar. One is redefining routine, one is redefining flexibility. Redefining routine. Routine doesn't mean it needs to be minute for minute, action for action. It doesn't have to be so strict. When I think about routine, I think that it's gonna be so strict, it's gonna be step by step. Not really. It can just feel more like this is the way that I organize my day, or this is the way the day goes, or this is what I like. This is a sequence of events or the general events I like to take, when I get up in the morning. Redefining flexibility, same thing. Flexibility doesn't mean that you have no routine. It means that you can make conscious and confident decisions and choices to pivot within that routine or change or pivot that routine. I love this tool because this next tool helps me a lot with depression, or it has in the past, and it's called variety versus variation. And so for me, and the type of personality that I am, variety, so like, I don't know, what's an example, like totally changing things up in the way that I go about my week or my day or something like that I don't love that, because I still like to be there, that routine aspect, and I don't like to be every day to be completely different for the sake of like that novelty. However, a bit of novelty is important to me when it comes to like feeling like these days are like it's Groundhog's Day. I'm doing the same thing every single day. I'm getting a little bit bored. I'm less excited. And in that case, what I do is I try to introduce variation. So variation, I picture as just like a little bit of change. And so maybe just like changing your route to work. Variety, I see as like a bigger change, whatever that might be. So experiment a little bit with variation and variety. I think it's interesting too, because they kind of both have to do with routine and flexibility. Finally, the last tool I have is called minimum purchase necessary. So basically it's taking a certain routine. So say it's like your morning routine or something like that. I don't necessarily mean the steps you use to do your skincare, but that too. Sort of write out that routine or think through every step in that routine. Now I want you to just think about the bare bones or the skeleton of that routine. What's basically the smaller version of the big version routine, and have sort of, I guess I would do 3 versions. One super small, just the essentials. This is really good for when you don't have time to do the full version, or you're just really low on energy. So you can say, well, I did my essential routine. Medium is like somewhere in the middle. You probably most likely or most days do a routine that's in this like second tier. And then the third is like the full blown, if I have all the time in the world and I'm gonna have a morning of 6 hours, this is what my routine looks like. For example, like on a Saturday when I don't work or something like that. So that is what I called minimum purchase necessary. That is the end of the video. I hope that you started considering where you might be on this flexibility routine scale and how that might be helping or perhaps not as helpful to you. Also, I have a goal by the end of June to get 500 subscribers on YouTube. So if you're not subscribed to me and you regularly watch my videos, or you enjoyed this one and would like to keep up with me, please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.